Hello and welcome once again to Perspective. Pakistan's foreign policy, relationship with the world, it has been talked about immensely, it has been talked about till no end. But we have never been able to get a definitive answer or understanding of where we stand and where we need to be. Fortunately, Pakistan saw a very interesting tenure in the past few years in the United Nations. And the gentleman who was behind that tenure, Mr. Abdullah Hussain Haroon, had made a unique difference in Pakistan's relationship with the world. We are honored to be in his home today, and since there's a lot to be talked about, I will not waste time on my introduction, and I will just introduce my guest, Mr. Haroon. Thank you very much, sir. Take time out and inviting us into your home. Thank you, sir. I'll jump in very quickly. Your tenure at the United Nations has been marked as unique because this is probably the first time that we were not at the receiving end, but we had value to add. You were meeting people we've never maybe engaged in the past, if that's the right word. And you made a lot of difference, and Pakistan got noticed in a positive way. Please comment.
Thank you. Very quickly, the moment I got there, the imperatives I laid out for myself was to introduce myself to the entire United Nations bureaucracy, all the ambassadors, not just some of the ambassadors, as was the custom. Thereafter, to go out and get known with members of Congress from the Senate and the House of Representatives, with members of New York's mayoralty and the New York provincial government, or provincial state government, and then professionals and people who move New York. Now, this is a very tall order, but it was essential in my mind, in my game plan, to become relevant to the UN and to those that consider the United States as a bulwark of the UN, to identify myself with those people and people who also had a say in affairs of the country, of the United Nations and my country. We achieved this in record time. There were some good reasons for it, and it added a further dimension which I wasn't then aware of. Well, the first thing that upset the apple cart for Pakistan, and it pushed us in a corner, was the Times Square bombing attempt. And my first rebuke to that, which was instantaneous, it was, let's rebuke this with a Sufi challenge. And I went on the air in Good Morning America, and I said, America, we're going to show you what we really are, a peace-loving nation. And I'm bringing a Sufi festival to New York. Full marks, the Americans gave us easy access, 50 visas. It was a huge order, $500,000 of expenditure. The government was not forthcoming. I think they paid $50,000 ultimately off that. Some we raised through Pakistanis, and most I paid myself. Under those circumstances, we got this tremendous public exposure with front-page photographs of Pakistani Sufi singers instead of Times Square, which is too small, we moved to Union Square. But we brought this thing about where all of a sudden New York was involved with the real face of Pakistan. And we immediately got this tremendous acceptability in New York. And all of a sudden, channels, radios, television were asking me to comment and speak on issues. I followed this up with some tremendous other work. Sufi music at the UN, Sufi music at the UN with India for celebrating Khwaja Gharib Nawaz. We did an arts exhibition, which was huge. We did a Gandhara exhibition, which is even bigger. And we had Rahat Fateh Ali Khan coming in, Tara Sayyad. There was music. There was a face of Pakistan projected in the press, in the media, which is worth tons of exposure. And we got all that and started ramping up Pakistan to a degree that at a time when the world was taking Pakistan as a pariah, New York started taking us as a different quantity.
If I may suggest. So what you're saying, to sum it up, is if you make an intelligent, well thought out branding exercise, if you sell well with a plan,
Correct.
it is
Correct.
the world will see who we really are.
Correct. And the immediate reaction was, I also changed all my people at the mission and brought some of the finest minds of the Foreign Office. And all of a sudden, Pakistan, which was blocked at many places of the UN, started finding easy access at all levels in the UN. And even ambassadors of all countries. And not just ambassadors. We reached out to Africa. I became a player in Africa through the NAM system. We reached out to South America. We supported very strongly through NAM and through the Group of 77 and through the Bolivarians we set up in South America. We reached out to the island states of the world and took up their issues, specifically with climate change. We were the driving force on climate change. We were suddenly everywhere. And we were being asked to put together papers. We had a brilliant staff, one after another, great boys who put up a strategy in which we created mostly the significance of green economies. We ourselves didn't implement any of it locally. Otherwise, there was $1 billion fund available to draw upon.
We're not short of intelligent people. We're not short of good people. We're not short of minds who can move the world. There was a time when we did move the world. So what you're saying, if I've understood correctly, is if done right, the world will notice us, the world will take us seriously, and we could actually add value instead of being at the beaten end, not even the beating, but the way beaten end right now that we are. What you're suggesting is if we continue to brand ourselves, position ourselves, add value, use the right people, and put them in the forefront, we could actually come. Well, I will not say completely, but we could gradually start rising back to the position that we should be and maybe even more.
Because when people who are the history tabulators of the UN got together, they named 4 people as outstanding for Pakistan of the UN. The first was Petrus Bukhari, who was a poet.
Yes.
Who was the first ambassador there. Magnificent work.
No doubt.
The second the name was His Highness Prince Ali the Aga Khan,
Of course.
and they spoke of his generosity and his style. The third was Jamshid Marka,
Of course.
who had a brilliant position for Pakistan. And the fourth, they thought, I was in that trend and lineup of people who brought Pakistan on the map. Well, I mean, that's kind of them. But there have been many brilliant ambassadors, don't get me wrong. But an ambassadorship can be taken in 2 ways. One, it can be taken from the point of view that how good was the bureaucratic attitude?
Sure.
And the answer is, it's not a bureaucracy alone. You have to take your bureaucracy along to push forward the national agenda.
Absolutely.
But you do need a spirit. Call it an entrepreneurial spirit. Call it whatever you may. If you can please everyone around you, what is a successful ambassador in my mind? Besides doing his job, besides delivering first-rate speeches, besides being a leader in the various forums of the UN, to be able to have the contacts and the movement flexibility, not to be misunderstood, but to be understood. And by which I say we had 2 of the most dangerous crises of our time when I was there at the UN, the Bombay incident and the Osama Laden killing. In both, by the grace of God, this country came out unscathed. It could have been, in one way, like Syria today, beaten to within an inch of its life for what would have considered transgressions of the highest order. But we managed to talk our way. We managed to bring forth hope. We managed to bring forth a change of attitude, a change of design, a change of what we want to see a future world as. And people saw and liked what they saw. And I think that's what makes the difference.
Phenomenal exercise in diplomacy, branding, marketing of Pakistan. You've talked about Syria. I'll come to that in just 1 second, because we need to. There's just too much happening in this region, one after the other, and we somehow, thank God, escape it every time. But every time it seems, oh God, are we next? So I'll come to that in just 1 second. You talk about Africa. I can see beautiful pictures of you with past presidents, leaders of Africa. The stage you set up, the door you opened, is there a follow through now that you've come here for personal reasons, various reasons?
Regrettably, no. They never even asked me who I would suggest to them. They should have asked. That would have been a courtesy. Taken your own decision. They had a retiree. It was a very fine gentleman, Mr. Masood Khan, who replaced me. But he'd been thrice retired, I beg your pardon. In my mind, the dynamism that ought to have been there was not necessarily there from that point of view. As I said, a very fine gentleman as a bureaucrat. And a bureaucrat is excellent for what needs to be done. But at the same time, he's not a groundbreaker. Again, in the holding pattern, I considered whatever I had to spend as something that I could give to my nation. Right? I don't think he had the wherewithal. So a lot of things stopped immediately, what I used to do. And more than that, the personal relationships that people want. You see, example, I was often dining with billionaires who were pertinent to the media. Marty Craver was a person who comes forward as a name. There were others. People who wanted to meet me and find out. How did I meet him? When we had the mosque crisis in New York, I remember there was a denial given to a permission to create a mosque near the Trade Center. And I got together with the OIC, especially Saudi Arabia and others. And they said this was not an issue they wanted to create a crisis out of. This was something that they did not wish to take to points where conflict would ensue, which would be detrimental to, in their thinking. I was that time president of the largest mosque in New York, which was built for the Saudis and the Kuwaitis, a position not held by any Pakistani before me. And we got the Muslim community together as well. And Saudi Arabia said, all right, we will finance a mosque a little further from there if necessary. Let's not make this a question, because the person who was developing the mosque was an Egyptian who was only making a ground floor mosque. The rest was going up as a complex of various things, nothing to do with Islam. It was commercial. But there was a feeling that it was being used in this fashion. And
it wasn't even a large statement for us.
And we went in and worked very hard to create consensus on it and created the consensus. And when that consensus was created, Pakistan had tremendous confidence. Not from the American point of view, because we never touched the Americans. We kept it as an organization of Islamic countries effort, led by the large-heartedness of the Saudi king, who said, I'll just build you a new mosque, a couple of streets down of me. If the idea is to serve the area, it doesn't have to be bang in front of where they don't want to see it. Let's have it where we can worship. And that would be exclusively a mosque, not for other purposes as was contemplated.
And a much, much better statement.
And a much better, absolutely. And we managed to get that to that position. And Marty was then the head of the Daily Mail evening paper in New York. And they created an impetus saying, there are people who in Islam can take the point of view where the world must knit closer together as a community. Now, it's a far cry from the clash of civilizations, and that, I think, was a major contribution. When the question came of burning of the Quran, we were vehement. I was appointed the speaker for the entire organization of Islamic countries, and we brought in people and created a very strong position. But where there was a question of protecting the local community, of bringing together our religion and those who are not necessarily for it, in an agreement which would not be, in a way, conflicting with each other, but living in harmony with each other, which is what the Quran says anyway. I think we succeeded a great deal on these issues.
I would just add here briefly that what you're saying is the world creates issues so we would react negatively, and if we react if we react positively, diplomatically, those issues will probably never be created. The whole purpose would be short. Coming to Syria, that is a regional issue which is becoming just as big as probably Iraq slowly, the impending fear of an attack. How do you see that panning out, and what should be, regardless of what should be Pakistan's position in this ongoing regional issues which keep moving from one country to the other?
Let's take it in perspective. This issue moved up the charts about 2 years ago. Now, it's a very interesting factor. We were leaders in this game. We said, look, as far as this issue is concerned, the biggest problem is that no country goes into any vociferous activity also with revolutionary moves or rebellion moves unless there's someone else behind them. You cannot do it on your own, right? That is a basic principle, that if anything happens in a country, a neighboring country has to have some sort of soft spot for those who are doing what they're doing.
Some interest.
Some interest, right? I'm calling it politely a soft spot. In this particular incident, the arming of Syrian rebels was not exactly, shall we say, without suspicion. Why? Why did it happen? Syria at one stage remained alone with Iran as the last of the what was considered the anti-American bloc. And then over time, the Hamas came in, the Hezbollah came in Lebanon, and of course, Iraq came in. And then Ahmadinejad moved towards Egypt. The Islamic Brotherhood and the Islamic Revolution in Iran had a very close affiliation, very diplomatic and astutely handled by certain people. When that move took place and Ahmadinejad went to Cairo, I was one who said here to people, I think a goose is going to be cooked because this is not going to be acceptable. This is an expansionist. Sure. Because Egypt then becomes the passage to Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Mauritania. Morocco, of course, is an island of discontent in that, with siding openly with the West. And not only that, Chad, Mali, Niger, the whole of Central and Sub-Saharan Africa and Northern Africa opens up. You already know that Somalia and the Horn of Africa is in considerable stress. So I figured this is not going to be something, and you already further know that they're dividing up Sudan in this very reckless manner. There are already 3 states, there might be 4 or 5. Sudan will become, from being the largest country of Africa, it's going to become the smallest countries of Africa. And then there are economic problems with fossil fuels and things like that. Now, all this as it was developing, I knew that the soft spot in the underbelly had to be Syria because of its system, but to get sort of inactive people to rise in complete rebellion, this is going to have long-term effects. And I think very little was thought about it. I was one of the first in the Security Council to say, what are the demons you're going to unleash? Look at that. Because those demons will not be contained within Syria. Those demons will go outside Syria. And it will affect the Middle East in a very, very, very difficult manner. I also said, remember, this is the toehold left of a resurgent Soviet Union in the Middle East. Having lost all of North Africa and all in the Middle East, this is where it might be a brave last stand. Now, that may or may not be successful. It has its consequences. So we started negotiating, and I went to, there's a photograph on the wall. I had a long meeting with the Prime Minister of Qatar, who's one of the foremost leaders in this particular aspect. And I said, look, rather than make this a Western resolution that you're trying to sponsor, why don't we make it a unanimous resolution? And it worked. He called a meeting of Russia, China, Pakistan, India, and Azerbaijan, who are considered to be the more reasonable members of the Security Council with another point of view. The other point of view was, in fact, brought in at Libya. In Libya, when there was a stalemate, those trying to change the situation in Libya first tried to split the country. Benghazi one side, Tripoli one side. When it didn't work out in Benghazi and they got a beating and Gaddafi nearly took Benghazi, Al-Qaeda friends were lifted from Yemen and taken to train the rebels in Benghazi and to be used in Benghazi. That's what made the qualitative or the quantitative change there, which then led to whatever happened. But even in Libya, we said, careful. This is going to open up sub-Saharan Africa. And they didn't want to listen to us at that time. We said, your manpads, which is weaponry of the highest degree, and other things will leak, and Gaddafi's money will leak. Today, sub-Saharan Africa is up in arms. They put up an army called ECOWAS to try and fight it in sub-Saharan Africa, but it's gone out of control. And from the Red Sea to the Atlantic, there is a blaze of fire. They have to keep using people to bring it down. It's not going to go away that easily. It has been ignited. Where it leads to is a matter that remains to be seen, but it has created tremendous conflict, trials, and tribulations for people in the region.
Near over.
And now comes Syria. So
okay,
Syria,
I'm going to have to interrupt you with apology. You take a very short break. When we come back, we'll talk about Syria, the flashpoint right now, Pakistan's position in this whole situation briefly, and then what I'd like to also talk about is what should Pakistan's view towards foreign policy, towards relationship with neighbors, towards relationship with extended neighbors be. So let's take a short break. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching Perspectives without wasting any time. Syria, what do we expect and what should Pakistan's position be in this whole situation?
under the situation I was talking to you about before the break, I want to show you a recognition which is unique in nature.
Please.
And I'm going to read to you from this. We put together a consensus. First, the Security Council started falling apart, and the threat of the double veto emerged for the first time, China and Russia. And we tried to avoid that. We said, give a good chance. And after we did what we did, the Syrian ambassador got up, came and embraced me. I have a photograph of that embrace, saying, you know, you have been beneficial to try and achieve world peace. And this is something which is recognized all over the UN at that moment. The Chinese ambassador wrote a unique letter on July the 23rd, 2012, when this crisis was at its peak. Excellency, on behalf of the Chinese government, I have the honor to express to you and your Security Council team our warm congratulations for the outstanding performance and contributions that Pakistan has made during the Council negotiations regarding the new draft resolution on Syria. I would like to express the profound gratitude of China to Pakistan for its firm support in resolving the issue. The Security Council was largely divided on the issue in Syria and faced great difficulties in reaching consensus on the proposed draft resolution. Thanks to the wisdom of Pakistani leadership, the fair, just and firm position of Pakistan, and with our close coordination and cooperation, we all have been able to defend the purposes and principles of the UN Charter to ensure that the Syrian issue remains on the right track of political resolution. We'd like to particularly commend the courage and diplomatic skills that you and your team have demonstrated under extremely difficult circumstances in tabling and carrying forward the draft resolution on a technical rollover of UNMISS. The role played by Pakistan has been instrumental in bridging the differences amongst Council members, ensuring the adoption of Resolution 2059 by consensus and sending a unified message of support to UNMISS and to the mediation of Joint Envoy Kofi Annan. We highly appreciate the unique and remarkable role played by Pakistan on the Security Council on issues related to international peace and security.
Which is brilliant.
I haven't seen a letter from a Chinese like this ever before.
And that pretty much, if I may say, that outlines what our position should be going forward.
Exactly.
Will we be able to hold that pattern?
No. After I left, unfortunately, we went back to a position not of strength, but a holding position, which is unfortunately the sort of situation where you decide to sit and wait and see what happens. We were no longer out front.
Our historical position, if I may say.
We were no longer out front. We fell back. I don't blame a gentleman who has been given 3 retirement extensions will not put his life on the table in this way, which is unfair to him. He's a fine person, don't get me wrong. But what we needed there was dynamism. We needed a younger person with some exposure. There were people like that available. I don't want to name them, it will cause controversy. There were people like that who were there, who would go out and carry forth this program and take it up. It didn't happen, let's say that. I don't want to criticize anyone, but it didn't happen.
Given where the region stands, where we stand, where the region is going, what we're expecting it to go in the coming weeks and months and years, what position can we now take, given we have a new government,
I think
we have stability?
To have made a replacement to when I left, they should have had plenty of homework done and carried certain things forward. One of the major situations when we decided to contest the Security Council, and my team will know, the first thing I said, gentlemen, we're not here to count our friends. We are here to name our enemies, if any, and then bring them to being friends, because then we will win the seat.
Absolutely.
And ironically, as things would go, I could name with a great amount of alacrity that some of our greatest friends didn't vote with us for the Security Council. Switzerland for one, Germany for 2, France, supporters of friends, and Indonesia did not vote for us. And many other nations that I wouldn't wish to name that Pakistan feels are, strong bulwark of support for us. And yet, when the first identification was made, whom do we have to worry about? And a young Britain officer said, sir, the Americans have put up Kyrgyzstan to divide the Muslim vote. The first place the vote will be divided is in Central Asia. And by the greatest amount of goodwill, we broke all the Central Asian votes from Kyrgyzstan, led by the fiery and magnificent ambassador of Kazakhstan, the major state. And they all voted with us, which was something that was extraordinary. So that was where we won the first strong battle. And then we just went around the world. I must relate to one of the most interesting statements. The 10-member Pacific Island group, that's 10 votes, they're all within the protectorate of the United States. And I had worked intensively on them. We were like brothers and sisters. And the Americans called a meeting in which the American ambassador said to the chair and the members there that, we are the protectorate, the foreign policy of your countries are in our domain. We're going to ask you to vote for Kyrgyzstan, not for Pakistan. And the chair said, we're not voting for Pakistan. So the Americans said, well, then that's settled. They said, no, not quite. But we have a brother, Mr. Ambassador Haroon, and we've all decided to vote for him because he's been a brother to us and stood by us through every trial in the last few years.
So the personal relationship.
Personal relation, and that was 10 votes. I think one of them slipped away later, intense pressure. But what I'm trying to say to you, that war, and this filters around the UN. You don't not hear it, you hear it when things like this happen. And there's so much more.
Well, you do.
I got every single vote in South America. And ironically but one, which I'm not going to name, it would embarrass them tremendously. And India not only voted for us, it got us 8 different votes. Africa, 90% voted with us. Eastern Europe, which was right in the Soviet bloc, I'm proud to say that they were not pressurized, and the Easterns gave us a significant vote. So it was something that was extraordinary, and that showed how goodwill can permeate and bring about tremendous results for nations.
Personal goodwill.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to bring this closer to home. Karachi is close to yourself, close to your family. You have great interest in the city. How can your diplomacy, how can your skill, how do you see Karachi panning out? Because it's one city which is resilient. We keep beating it down, it keeps coming back. This phenomenal potential. What now?
I'm not going into the causes, it's a long list. And
irrelevant.
I think all this came about over the many years. And definitely the Afghan war has accelerated this situation in its byproducts. When Ambassador Smirnov was leaving, and he was asked, well, as you leave, thoughts in your mind, and he said, I'm leaving back 100 years of famine, of disease, of warfare, and a lot of sadness, sickness, and lack of development. And said, as bad as that? And he said, yes, you've taken on something that you don't know. And I think from the day that the Ruskies moved into Afghanistan and the spin-offs thereof and the various positions, and as a member of the Al-Haq government, I said, don't do it. Clearly, on record, I said, don't go into Afghanistan. The strategic depth theory has a cost which is so huge that it's going to drown Pakistan. And the net result is where we are today. We have all the problems. We have wasted away all the fat around Pakistan in paying for that war. The cost is in hundreds of billions of dollars. We don't even know it. We're too afraid to tabulate it due to public perception. And there's no doubt in our mind we could have been neutral observers and helped our brothers who came across and needed our help. But to have been involved the way we did in a superpower game, we have paid a tremendous price, which we're still paying and will continue to pay for a very long time to come. That has also affected Karachi. The Karachi episode is not just based on the Afghan war, which is post-77, but the enigma started, I think, in the late 60s, early 70s. It was not immediately cognizable, but it started showing its face in a different fashion much later. You see, where we brought about, if you look at the Mein Kampf, and then its first adherent, Juan Perón of Argentina, who said he kept and studied the book like a Bible. And our Prime Minister, late Prime Minister, Mr. Putra, was also very impressed by Juan Perón. And a lot of the tactics, the book created as ideological cleaning instrument. It was used for creating various forms of cadres that went out. The brown shirts, the black shirts, or the this shirt, or the that shirt. And it basically went into state nationalizations in various ways, larger holding of state property and industry, etc. Well, over the 70s, the thing we lost was we lost direction, and we somehow decided in the tail end of the life of socialism and communism to become a part of the experiment without the makeup of the mind to be able to understand where we're going. There were some benefits, there always are, and then there were losses. The costs were far higher. We're not talking of losses at the moment, the costs. And those costs, over the years, magnified to a degree that nationalization became a scourge. It's a sore. We're still paying for it. The way industry, instead of moving towards further privatization, moved to further nationalization, while the whole developing world was moving towards privatization. Even India, with all its mandarins, was moving towards privatization. And then the single unit state was, there was an attempt to build it stronger. And the 18th Amendment was just a mild attempt in allowing it to be neither, as we say in our language, not a tikar, not a bater. And the net result of all that has been is no checks and balances, unlimited, unremedial authorizations to people who have never known better. They do not understand the rudiments. The public does. The most important thing about democracy is the sovereignty of democracy lies with the people. You only become representative to that power.
Sure.
The power does not move its base. You represent it. And what happened instead was we started electing autocracies and aristocracies. And state money became like when Louis XIV was spending these billions on Versailles. And he said, for God's sake, what about the state? And he said, I am the state. And that's the thing that became here. Everyone became the state. The laws were not for them. The money was theirs to spend. Murder, mayhem, loot, rape, pillage, whatever, all became not sacrosanct, but the rule of the day. And everyone used it to embellish their own fortune. So comes in karate, which was the fattest cow in the whole breed. And over the years, there were many experiments. Some of those experiments were upset by the Afghan war and the strongly incremental Afghan 1.5 to 1.7 million people brought to the city without adherence to the rules of Pakistan, the laws of Pakistan, the taxes of Pakistan. They owed nothing to the state or the people of Pakistan. And right there, things then got out of control, and the people decided, the political parties decided, to create mafias. And much on the pattern, all of a sudden, a book that was in great realization was Mayor Daley of Chicago's books on how he did it. And everyone wanted a similar pattern. And the nexus between the mafiosi and the city governments and provincial governments, or whatever government, everyone got into the act. And then, as an amoeba breeds, it separates into two. And then more parties got involved, more money,
and that
more
is
loot,
where we stand today.
more pillage, and everyone is basically raking it in. And the poor man is paying the cost of one of the most expensive energy sources in the world. How can you have success in industry where your energy is 3 times that of what the American pays? How can you have success in the world when the rule of law does not prevail? How can you have success in the world when everything that you do is based towards self-aggrandizement? Till today, look at the costs of the sector, the governmental sector. Prohibitive.
I have about 5 minutes. If I haven't asked something you'd like to add, anything you'd like to enlighten us with, please.
There is a vision expounded by Mr. Fatmi in the Foreign Office. It's on the front pages of newspapers. The really good point I see is that there must be an economic primacy in our foreign policy. When I was in Africa, traveling in Africa, I suddenly bumped across important people of England with businessmen traveling in turboprops on the small airports of Africa. And I'd say, what are you doing here, sort of a thing, in the middle of dark. I was there at the base of the UN. Mm-hmm. And there's a well, we're here to be able to, create. I would say to Mr. Fatmi that today, the nation carries a story which is rather good. Economics to drive foreign policy. That's what the Brits have been doing for centuries. The empires have been founded on it, absolutely. A nation of shopkeepers, basically expanding all over the world and becoming hugely rich and nabobs, as they were called in the process. Well, I'm glad Mr. Fatmi has raised this. The only point I want to make, and it's so essential, it's a long thing, but I'm just commenting on one aspect of it, that check up, Mr. Fatmi, you have over 100 embassies around the world. Each embassy churns out people that then become locals there, and they then milk you to the core. Either shut them all down, or any one of those embassies from the ambassadors to the deputies to the commercial councillors or whatever it is, has to provide to you an annual sheet of what is the bottom line of the business they have done for Pakistan in those countries. And believe me, I've traveled so much in the last 20 years, I can tell you many more stories that will make the Foreign Office quake at its feet, because nobody justifies. What have you expanded these people for? What have you got out of it? If it is nothing, then you are seriously to blame, all of us, for this. And I think now that the opportunity is there, and it's given this brilliant lead in the nation's front page, forget the rest, drive this. Each embassy must produce an economic return to Pakistan worthy of its status, worthy of the expenditures that has been made on them. Initially, it may not come through immediately. You do that, and there will be a quantum leap in Pakistan's. They're not marketing Pakistan. They're not branding Pakistan. They're not bringing in what needs needed for Pakistan. And this, I think, is a very, very important thing that I thought we would mention. The other aspect on the economic front, please remember, the trillions of surpluses are Russia, China, India, and the Middle East, not the West from any stretch of that. The West has started to emerge out of the recession, yet the United States alone has a $17 trillion debt now. And everyone else has their major problems. They're restructuring to save themselves a lot of grief. And a lot of them have sent the huge rise and the huge decline of Ireland was based on American supplies that they went into in a very big way. And then when America pulled back to shore up its own reserve, the same has happened in India. So please watch the world. Deal with the world which has the capacity to deal with you. Just don't follow hackneyed processes. I think even with the Middle East you have a problem. Look at it. The Saudi king threw $11 billion into the Egyptian army's lap just a week ago to show how significant it is to its own security needs. So where is Pakistan? Why aren't we marketing it in the same fashion? I'm sure there are many countries in the world that think very important. And unfortunately, we always sell ourselves cheap because there are individual deals which are done. And as the late Mahbub al-Haq used to say, billions lie abroad. Well, that's a sad story.
Sure, there's a lot of countries, who think we have great value. I think just waiting for us to walk up to them and sell better. Mr. Haroon, thank you very much for taking time out once again. Until next time.